It's so fascinating to me because I've been hearing rumors for decades and nobody really knows anything. And here you actually have data, which is pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah.
And you did this as a scientific study, right? Am I right about that?
Yes. That is what we have tried to adhere to be very strict in our approaches and always giving sources for where we have it. And I've been reading a lot also. But
I want to emphasize that because I think a lot of people I've heard personally who are talking about how many Messianic Jews are in Israel, it's part of a fundraising strategy. And here you're doing this scientifically. Yes. Right, you're not saying this. Oh, we need a lot of money here for the Messianics in Israel because there's so many of them, and they need support or something. Which is what I've heard, right? You're actually doing this as science. That's pretty cool, as objective research. All right, which is why it was at the World Congress of Jewish Studies.
Yeah, that's why I presented it there, of course. Yeah. So, but also you can say now it's not only being used. Numbers here are not only being used by the Messianic ministries and things like this. Is also being used for the anti-missionary organizations.
So is this backfiring?
No, I don't think so. But it's just to say that they also have been used inflating numbers because see how
they
big
have.
See how big the threat is.
I hadn't thought of that. I see. So this hurts them in a way. You're saying is that?
I don't know. I don't know if I don't think it hurts them. I think they
or it helps them. I don't know.
Maybe, but I think most of the information we provide here, they already know. I mean, for each congregation, maybe they don't have the statistics now, but they will know most congregations anyway.
I see. So they're keeping track of who these congregations are for their own purposes.
They do.
And they probably have their own database or something. Okay, gotcha. All right. Let's see what else you got. This is
so a typical Kehillah.
Yeah,
I think it will be people who might be interested in what that means. So we see most of the congregations are an Amuta, which means they are non-registered, non-profit organization in Israel.
That's the equivalent in the United States of what we call a 501c3, or in England or the United Kingdom they call that a charity. All right.
Yes. So they are kind of a charity, yes, in that sense. So most of the congregations will be an Amuta and registered in some way or another. They do not own their building.
Okay.
I mean, so this is just general. So of course, some congregations are not an Amuta and other congregations do own their buildings, but the typical congregations do not. Wow. They are non-liturgical, which means they don't pray from the Siddur, and they don't use typical, what you could say, Christian liturgies in the way they do their service. But they will eventually, sometimes they will cite the Shema Yisrael or the priestly blessing, or things like this.
What's the plus two? So we got Shema, the priestly blessing. What else? What's the third one?
So there's some might say the Lord's Prayer.
Okay.
But that's very few. Most of them will be the Shema or the.
This is interesting because if you go to and I just had a conversation with someone else for a podcast, and we were talking about different Jewish denominations, and I made the remark that every Jewish denomination is, in Christian terms, high church, right? It doesn't matter if you're Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, Karaite, every one of them has, this is the liturgy, this is what you say on Shabbat, you've got to get through these pages, and then what they call in Christianity low church, and maybe I'm misusing these terms, but it's not liturgical in the sense that you don't have a set formula that you recite when you go into the congregation each week. And you're saying most of them are non-liturgical. So I know this is related to the charismatic question. What do they do in the Kehillah? What do they do with the congregation?
So it differs a little bit of whether or not they meet on a Friday or they meet on a Saturday.
Okay.
But so that's a plus two, right? So the last one there would be some of them also will light the Shabbat candles.
Okay.
Just a Jewish tradition. So that is typically, if they meet on a Friday, they will typically, have some sort of kiddush.
Because that's when Jews do the candle lighting service.
Yes,
is on Friday night. Okay, or Friday afternoon. Okay.
So, but typically they will have a time of songs where they sing together.
Okay.
And then after that, there will be a message of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And after the message, either they will have another song or the meeting will end.
So what, if you had to compare this to a type of church that my audience would be familiar with, and I probably am not familiar with, but a type of church in let's say in the United States, what would this be closest to? Which, like, I like putting things in boxes because it makes me feel more comfortable. If I can,
I like to be careful with putting things in boxes, but I guess it might from some of the. It might be relatable to an evangelical congregation in the United States.
Okay. Would that be like what they call non-denominational congregation?
It doesn't necessarily. Not necessarily, but it could be like a non-denominational. But I think
okay.
Doesn't need to be.
And is that because they were influenced by these congregations from the West, or did this happen organically, or do we have no idea?
Now I have to be careful.
Okay.
So one thing is, we did ask the congregations if they had any denominational or any connectedness with denominations or streams of faith outside of Israel or within Israel.
Okay.
And I want to be careful in just saying, no, they are definitely influenced by the Americans. Definitely some are influenced by the evangelical churches within America.
You're saying they are?
Some are, not all, some are. This is not a typical Kehillah mission because they can vary, and some are influenced by Reformed theology. There are seven fellowships that out loud will say that they are Reformed. Now, not Reformed Judaism, but
okay, that was my question.
Yeah, not
so Reformed. Does that mean Calvinism?
Yeah, some sort of. Yeah, they will look back to the Westminster meeting in 1910 in Edinburgh also, and things like this. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So 7 of them actually self-identify that way. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and some are influenced by the Baptists, and some are not influenced directly by anyone, but the pastor has connections to all kinds of different denominations and fellowships outside. Now we are talking mainly about the Hebrew-speaking congregations, because the Russian-speaking congregations, they will either be influenced in an anti-Orthodox Christian approach. Now, they don't want to be Orthodox Christians, so that's kind of like the opposite way around.
And by Orthodox, you mean Russian Orthodox?
Yes, Christian Orthodox, yeah, in all its shapes and forms. So the Russian Orthodox Church, there's lots of anti-Semitism throughout, especially in the former Soviet Union and with the pogroms, and you mentioned Chagall. So they have a tendency to not want to do that, and others have connections to Pentecostal or Baptist churches back in Ukraine or in Russia. But it's difficult to say how much they are influenced, but it's difficult to say how much.
Okay, so you said there's no denominational marker, and this surprises me. There's no structured proselytizing. So you got to talk about that. And the reason that's important, I think, to share with the audience, and it surprises me, is that I think the reason that this rabbi in Ashdod said Hitler wanted to destroy our bodies, they want to destroy our souls, is that the assumption is that the whole purpose is that this is a fifth column. They're just pretending to be Jews just to convert us. This whole thing is a proselytizing endeavor, and it's not an authentic expression of Judaism. But you're saying the typical Kehillah doesn't have any structured proselytizing. Tell us what that means.
So first of all, of course, they would disagree with what the Orthodox community is saying. The Jewish Orthodox community is saying that they are not authentically Jewish. Right? They would say we are authentically Jewish. My mother or my father was killed in the Holocaust, or my grandparents fled. All these kinds of things. The second thing is they do believe that Jesus is the Jew Messiah and do want to share that message, you can say, with their fellow Jew. But the most congregations do not have, structured strategies of how are we proselytizing our neighbors. They mostly just keep to themselves. And then if people ask them on one-on-one, they will share their faith and they will invite them to the Kehillah, but it will be more on a friendship-based style more than a structured. It doesn't mean that, some congregations do have a structured evangelization approach, but most of them don't.
So I think a lot of people in the U.S. are familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons who go literally knocking door to door. Is there anything like that in the Messianic Jewish movement where, and if I could be mischaracterizing it, but I think for Jehovah's Witnesses they have a mitzvah, right? They actually have like some religious requirement to go and evangelize or to spread their faith. Is there something like that? I mean, basically, you're saying there isn't something like that in a formal way, at least. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, all pastors will say, share your faith with your friends. All pastors will say, be open about your faith and share it and preach that Jesus is the Jewish Messiah and all these kinds of terms. Okay. But from that to a structured, strategic plan on how to reach your neighbor and tell them that the Jesus is the Jewish Messiah as a congregation, that's a long way.
How does that compare to churches, let's say in the United States, evangelical churches? Do they typically have some structured strategy or approach to, and I don't know what the term is, right? Proselytizing, and I think they generally target non-Jews, right? But I've met people who have street ministries who go out and they do different things. I met one guy who goes out and goes to parks and fixes bikes of little kids, and then while he's fixing the bikes, he shares about Jesus. I don't know if that's typical or not. I have no idea. Is this typical of evangelical churches in I don't know about in Denmark or the U.S. where they don't have a structured proselytizing, or would that be atypical?
First of all, I think I just have to say, to be very clear, that the Messianic congregations in Israel are very clear on not doing any kind of proselytizing for children.
Okay. Well, this wasn't in Israel. This was in Pennsylvania.
Yes. Okay. So I just want to be clear that.
And he wasn't Messianic. He was just regular Christian. Okay. Yeah, and that's actually because there's an Israeli law that it's illegal to proselytize to children.
Yes.
To minors.
So they do have children camps, but all parents that just for their own children. But if you're an outsider, you have to, or even their own children have to sign a documentation that they know that this is is a Messianic children's camp or whatever. They're very particular about not proselytizing towards children at all.
Okay.
On any level. Okay. Now, if it's I don't know if it's atypical for congregations in the States to not have a strategy for proselytizing, but most fellowships, especially evangelical fellowships, will have built-in mission trips of some kind.
Okay.
Regularly.
Oh, so that's the mishpetzet, the slot that's missing, in a sense, the mission trips. Okay, so they don't have something like that. I see.
No, they don't.
Andrew, that's fascinating.
In general, some might have, right? Some might have, but in general, the general picture does not show that.
So another way that might be expressed is like a soup kitchen, I guess, or am I right? That's how they do it in the Western world?
So in Israel, they will have the congregation will have relief work, you can say. So they will give out food distributions and clothes and things like this, but they will not talk about Yeshua while they do it.
Okay. Wow.
It's disconnected.
That's fascinating. So now I have to ask the question, is that because, what is the reason for that? I mean, I want to say, is that dafka? In other words, it's a Hebrew word. Is it really Aramaic word? Is that because they're specifically trying to avoid what they're accused by the Orthodox of doing? Or is it because they're afraid to do it? Or because they just want to be left alone and do their own thing? What is, or maybe it's all the above. What do you think the reason is for this?
There's definitely a reason of not being accused of buying people.
Okay.
Right,
No,
so
I mean in
that's
general why they have no structured proselytizing.
Oh, I thought you meant the relief work. Yeah, but still, I think it is both due to their relatively small numbers within the country, and all the fears and the ideas that goes on in Israel targeting the Messianic Jews as a problematic entity.
Okay.
And therefore, I think they are careful in how they share their faith.